Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So, the fallout from the Douglas Murray debate with Joe Rogan and Dave Smith, whereby Douglas Murray actually annihilates and obliterates Joe Rogan and Dave Smith in a profound and rather hilarious way, if you ask me, because I think Douglas Murray is one of those highly intellectual individuals. And well, you've got two comedians, and Joe Rogan, I'm not saying he's not smart at all. Neither am I saying that Dave Smith isn't smart either, but they are two comedians. They're experts in being comedians, but when it comes down to certain topics, Douglas Murray really outshines. Joe Rogan, yes, 100%. He loves asking questions. He loves learning, but he has a lot of individuals on his podcast that he even admits that are leaning one particular way, let's say, against Israel. He doesn't have many people that actually align with Israel. Now, some people in my comment section blew up and said that no, Douglas Murray was way outside of his depth. The internet has been rather divided on this, but having listened to the entire 3 hour conversation this morning and having watched a lot of the clips that are circulating online, they're very, very selective. I'll have you know about that. So some of them are missing a little bit of context surrounding where they got to that particular moment. And I made a video about my initial reaction yesterday, which again, lots of people blew up about it and lots of people disliked the video. Lots of people also liked the video. But I think Douglas Murray is a true hero. And it's not because I am throwing smoke up his backside or whatever else, but I listen to the way he talks versus the way that Joe and Dave were talking. And I can understand where Joe and Dave were coming from to some degree, but I understood where Douglas was coming from more so. And Douglas raised a much better point several times over, but it seemed like Joe and Dave were more in the defensive rather than actually admitting, okay, maybe there's an actual problem here. So let me just say this. I'll preface it by saying this before I show you any of the other clips that has Douglas Murray calling out Joe Rogan, which few people would actually ever do in his own damn studio, believe you me. But the problem we've got in this world today is we have so much information at our fingertips. We have podcasters out there. We've got comedians. We've got all kinds of people with so many different professions that will just look at something online and claim to be an expert in that, and they'll start sharing their opinion online, which is totally fine, okay? But when you ask that person that is not an expert in any topic at all, they're an expert in themselves, pretty much, but not an expert in a war-like situation such as Israel or Churchill, for example, or politics or whatever else. And by no stretch of the imagination do I ever say when I'm doing this show that I'm an expert in anything. I look at what people are saying and I criticize based on what I know to be the truth. And I don't claim to think that I know everything at all. I've never said that I know everything. And never do I say that I am doing this to be some shock jock or provocative individual. I mean, by all means, I can say some very provocative things, but I've got to live with myself knowing full well that I've led people astray. And that's what a lot of people are doing with their podcasts. Like Candace Owens is very good at doing this. Shock jock kind of information, rather provocative, gets the clicks, gets the information. But the problem is you're spreading information that is rather dangerous, especially when it comes to a young, vulnerable mind. And I think that's what Douglas was trying to allude to with Joe Rogan and calling him out and saying, Joe, you've got the biggest platform in the world, and yet you're having people on your show that are spreading these disingenuous thoughts and saying, this is my opinion. You're entitled to an opinion, but it's so outrageous from the actual truth, and people will take that as gospel sometimes. You got to understand, like, yes, you're not in control of what people think, but you are in control of what you say. And if you're saying things that are not the truth and go so far against history, then why say it? What is the point in saying it aside from you trying to get clicks? That's exactly what Ian Carroll does and Daryl Cooper. I've listened to both of them, and I do not like the way they come across. I do not believe that they're honest people. They are trying to get a name for themselves, and all credit to you to get a name for yourself. but at what cost? And Douglas was way in his depth by saying this to Joe Rogan. He's got to be very careful. I understand he wants to have conversations with people, but you've got to be very careful with who you platform and the kind of information that you are sharing, whether or not it is truthful. And if you are getting someone on your show that is not telling the truth, then have some pushback. Have some pushback and don't throw smoke up their backside and say, oh, you're fantastic for saying this. You're doing incredible work. And then saying that they're an incredible historian or whatever else, like when they're not. So have a watch of this little moment where Douglas Murray calls out Joe Rogan and Dave Smith in a brilliant way. Have a watch.
The expert, or
no, I think
exactly
authority matters. I think
expert?
authority matters, and I think that if you just throw a lot of shit out there and then say I'm not interested in the alternative views on this, and particularly when it's a counter narrative that is wildly off, and when you get people, look, I just feel we should get it out straight away. I feel you've opened the door to quite a lot of people who've now got a big platform, who have been throwing out counter-historical stuff of a very dangerous kind.
You mean Daryl? Are you talking about Daryl?
Daryl, who's the other one?
I don't think Daryl has.
Derek.
I don't think there's anything dangerous about
what's the other
what
guy? Derek. What's his name? Cooper, is it? Which one is it?
No, that's
Daryl Cooper.
Daryl Cooper. Who's the other one? There was one I just checked on the way here. Daryl Cooper, and then Daryl Cooper, Ian Carroll. Look, these guys are not historians. They're not knowledgeable about anything.
No one's calling Ian Carroll.
No, but then why listen to their views on Churchill?
Daryl is incredibly knowledgeable.
He's not.
It's just
he's not.
Yeah,
he's not. He's wildly. Several reasons. One is when he was offered to debate the current greatest living
view him as the chief villain is my hyperbolic, provocative statement. But
what's
Douglas,
the point of that?
Well, okay, but Pat Buchanan wrote an entire book on this. Is he not allowed? Is he not an expert? Is he not allowed to be
he's
interviewed?
Certainly not an expert. He can be interviewed. I've watched Pat Buchanan debate. I watched Pat Buchanan debate against Churchill historians, and he was absolutely leveled because he doesn't know what he's talking about.
When did Pat Buchanan debate and get leveled?
About 20 years ago.
I'm just
He
curious.
debated against Andrew Roberts and several other historians at Intelligence Squared in London. I was there. He didn't know what he was talking about. He had a contrary view, and it was interesting and stimulating to hear. But if you only get the contrary view, which is, isn't it fun if we all pretend Churchill was the bad guy of the 20th century, at some point you're going to lead people down a path where they think that's the view. And that's horse shit of the most profound kind.
I don't think that's what he's trying to do.
I think that's exactly what we're doing. And the problem is that because your own platform has come about because you're a very successful comedian and much more, and you do ask questions, and you are interested. But there are a lot of people who have come along, partly I think because they've come on this show, who have come along and they've decided, I can play this double game. On the one hand, I'm going to push really edgy and frankly sometimes horrific opinions. And then if you say that's wrong, they say, I'm a...
So you raise a very good point here, or several very important points. You got people that will come on that will say their opinion and just go, this is just my opinion. You don't have to follow along with this opinion if you don't want to, but this is just what I believe to be true, right? And then they'll say this outlandish statement or claim thinking that they actually know what they're talking about. They really don't. And then when they get called out for it, they get defensive and they go, oh, but I'm a nobody. I didn't mean it the way that I said it. And so what was the point in saying it in the first place? It's like, let's look over here. No, let's look over here now. It's drawing attention away from themselves when they're the ones that actually said the provocative thing. And that, to me, is completely disingenuous. How is it different from the left? With the left, we're saying some really crazy, outlandish things. Obviously, people in the left were defending those crazy and outlandish things when people on the right, and even myself, looking at it going, this is crazy, this is nuts. How can you say such a thing? This goes well beyond the truth. We need to focus on the truth here. Let's get to the truth. But somehow now the right is back in power. The right has now gone completely off the rails with certain individuals like Ian Carroll, who's a conspiracy theorist. You have Daryl Cooper that believes, even though he says it's like in a joking kind of manner, or like in a way that's not real or accurate, but he believes that Churchill was the chief villain of World War II. And then you start reducing what Hitler, Stalin, and Mao did. You start reducing all the other atrocities that actually happened when you point to the fact that you think Churchill was the real villain of World War II, not Hitler, not Stalin. It's like a mind game, and you're turning people away from what is actually factually correct versus just your opinion. And again, Douglas points out that you've got to be very careful with that, especially when it comes to historical accuracies, which we know Churchill was not the villain at all. He is the savior. He's the greatest Briton, as we know. He did lots of things that no one would even dare to do. And in fact, after Chamberlain was kicked out, they begged Churchill to come back because they were losing badly. And Churchill, when he came back, everything drastically changed. It drastically changed. And again, Douglas in the interview points out, well, the worst thing is that Hitler would have won. If Churchill didn't do the things that he did, Hitler would have won. And then what would have happened to the world as we know it? And then you've got these people in modern times that will look at history and they'll go, oh, but Hitler didn't say that. He wasn't anti-Semitic. But in 1930, he was anti-Semitic in public, which is exactly what Daryl Cooper tries to say that he wasn't. So you're saying that his book, Mein Kampf, wasn't public to people. Are you saying that? Are you? Daryl Cooper is trying to turn people away in a somewhat subtle manner, but it's not really subtle when you actually know history. But for someone such as Jake Shield, Candace Owens, Ian Carroll, for example, all these people that are on the right, and even Joe Rogan that will sit there and listen, Tucker Carlson too, they're all the same. They all defend each other for these outlandish claims. And then they go, oh, I don't think that he's saying that. I don't think you think that you know what he was saying. Like, and I'm just going, I think I know why he was trying to say that in the first place. Why was he saying it the way that he was saying it? It just makes no sense to me. And Douglas has said that he has seen this before many, many times. You've got these dishonest, bad apples that come in and they get given a major platform. They end up going mega viral. And partly that's because lots of people on the right and even the left go, whoa, hang on a minute. What kind of claim is this? Like, and that's what I mean. Yes, you can have a platform. Doesn't mean that you get spread to the biggest audience in the world. That is kind of crazy to me. I think people that speak the truth deserve to be spread far and wide. And the ones that don't and are completely dishonest should be called out for being dishonest, and we need to have the truth take its place. So we're not getting that with what's happening at the moment, because what's happening at the moment is you got Joe Rogan, for example, that wants to talk to these people. He's curious. And sometimes, like, I'm all for curiosity. You can be as curious as you want to be, but you've got to be knowledgeable as well. Before going into a debate or a conversation with somebody, you've got to be knowledgeable that if someone says an outlandish claim, that you fact check it and you make sure that you're not leading people astray. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night because I'm a man of integrity. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I led people astray. If I lied to people, you lied to your faces. And I think that's why people keep coming back. Watch me. Sure, I'm not perfect. Sure, I make mistakes, and I will correct my mistakes if I make them. But I don't see any of these people doing it. I see Douglas doing it for sure. If he gets something wrong, he'll admit to it. But I think he was definitely in the right with this conversation. And to close, I want to finish on this. This is Dave Smith after the debate. This is what he's saying after the interaction he had with Douglas Murray. And what he's saying is he doesn't believe that Douglas came there to really debate ideas. He came in there to pretty much attack. Have a watch.
I left there with the feeling, I would say even a half hour in to the show, I think the reaction that we're getting, you know, I've had a lot of debates where the reaction is overwhelmingly that I won the debate. In this particular case, it's just that he lost it. Like, it wasn't even that I beat him in the debate. He started out with a 40-minute struggle session for Joe Rogan that just contained probably the longest stretched logical fallacy I've ever seen anyone open a debate with. Just a naked appeal to authority, completely unclear with what he was saying. He came in, so in this struggle session with Joe Rogan, I couldn't make this up. This is barely before I presented any thought or argument or opinion. I think it was before that. He comes in with this long that is an appeal to authority, an appeal to expertise. You're having these non-experts talk about issues that experts should talk about. And I'm not saying they should be censored, and I'm not saying they shouldn't talk about it, but they're talking about it and they're acting like they're experts. How are they acting like they're experts? Because they're talking about it. And when they're talking about it, it was just the most ridiculous argument, the most pompous, elitist, but essentially telling the host of the show and the entire audience, your opinion doesn't matter. Like, it was just a strategy to me that was like, you want to make everyone think you're a pompous asshole? It was wild. In there, sandwiched in this appeal to expertise, he trashes Daryl Cooper and Ian Carroll, whose names he doesn't even know, and admits that he's never consumed any of their material before. Yet he's trashing them and then claiming that you can only talk about these issues if you have expertise. Then when he's asked, does he have expertise? He goes, well, in some things. Do you talk about things you don't have expertise in? Yeah, all the time I talk about things I don't have expertise in. Okay, well, why can you do that? Oh, you're not even understanding my point. You know, it was just like the most wild thing. And it just became clear as the show went on that Douglas Murray came to do anything but debate me. Like, that was the theme of the entire show. He was there to do every single thing except have an exchange of ideas with me. Everything. It was either I'm going to go on, you know, these long appeal to authority, or I'm going to play ridiculous semantics games with you. Like when I say we're at war, you'll say we at war, and you're not at war. Your military is having an action, and you're not. And just contradicting himself constantly. The things he, like, instead of ever taking on my argument, he would think it was a big blow to be like, you haven't been there. You haven't been there. You don't have expertise. You don't, it's so bizarre because it's like, this would be, look, I'm not saying I would agree with it, but at least it would make sense if Douglas Murray refused to debate me and then made a video about why he wouldn't debate me. And in the video, he said, because he doesn't have expertise and because he hasn't been there and because, okay. But once you agree to the debate, you can't just say, I have expertise and you don't have expertise. You can't spend 40 minutes on that. It's like, demonstrate it, mother.
So there's a lot that Dave Smith said in that 3-minute long clip that I could spend a while addressing. But first and foremost, Douglas did come there to debate. He tried to debate. Could he have done it a little bit better? Probably. Yes, 100%. I agree with that. Do I agree with some of the things that Dave Smith said in that long 3-minute long spiel? It was actually 5 minutes long, but I stopped it at 3 minutes because I was like, oh, wow, this is a lot. Yes, I do agree with some of the things. And some of the things that I agree with on Douglas probably could have listened to Ian Carroll and Daryl Cooper a little bit more than what he did. He didn't listen to them a great deal, which means that he probably isn't as knowledgeable on the kind of information that they are sharing compared to what I would be, or compared to Dave Smith or even Joe Rogan. So that kind of didn't go in his favor a little bit. So yes, he definitely could have read up, but I understand where Douglas was coming from in saying that it's hard to listen to somebody that when you hear them say certain things like Churchill is the chief villain of World War II and things like that, it completely turns you off. And that one clip obviously went completely viral. And there's other things like Hitler didn't say anything anti-Semitic in public. And there's a video of Hitler in public sharing very anti-Semitic remarks. Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, which is sharing all of the anti-Semitic things and how he wants the country to change. And according to Dave, he claims that Douglas was very pompous, very brash, and created all these illogical fallacies in the debate. And well, if you actually listen to the full debate, to me, it just felt like Dave and Joe were mostly on the defensive for quite some time. I think it could have been a lot better. But even in like the first couple of seconds, Douglas just goes straight at it. Like it's no wasting time at all. And for 40 minutes trying to make a point that was very difficult to make, but I think he did the best that he possibly could. And yeah, like I know that some people will say that Dave won the debate. It wasn't really who won. I think Douglas got his points across better. I really do. And there's a number of times that Dave could have said things a lot better too. Like the whole thing, I think like I mentioned a moment ago with how you're supposed to interact. And when it comes to having pseudo historians and people that don't really know what they're talking about on the show, and like that kind of stuff can be considered dangerous, especially if you don't have someone to help back up. Like, for example, I like this one, and Joe should have, or Douglas should have brought this up as a prime example. The Terrence Howard and I think it's not Eric, but the other Weinstein guy, I forgot his name. Yeah, it's Eric Weinstein, I believe. Yeah, Eric Weinstein. So that debate, when Terrence was saying the kind of crazy things that Terrence was saying in the realm of science, Joe brought on Eric Weinstein, who is very knowledgeable, very factual about things that everyone, well, probably not all of us know about, but Eric knows a lot about science, physics, you name it. And he was refuting the claims that Terrence Howard was making and being very charitable at that. Now, when you come to history, okay, so the kind of examples that Dave was giving versus Douglas was giving good examples. Dave, not so much. Dave going science, you know, our trust the experts thing on the science element. We shouldn't have done that. So why should we trust the experts with history? Well, there's a huge difference between science and history. History has already been recorded for us to look at. We know what is true because people were already there. When it comes to science, on the other hand, totally different kettle of fish. So goes the saying, right? Anyway, I know I'm running a little bit long, but I wanted to clarify some of the things that I was saying. Closing, we just got to be very careful with who we decide to platform. And if we do decide to platform somebody, make sure the truth and the facts are there, present, and people know, because that's important. You guys take care, be blessed, and I'll see you all in the next video.